Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Orca Group series, where today's special guest is Alessandro De. Oh gosh, no, hang on. I practiced your last name, Alessandro.
It's okay,
Alessandro
Alessandro De Maddalena.
Maddalena. Yeah, yeah, and you have to kind of have that Italian spin at the end of it, or it doesn't work. um, so,
I live in South Africa. Nobody can tell properly my name.
oh, jeez, it's a lovely name. So this episode, we're joined with Elena, Elena from the group. She's the group expert, and Alessandro Del Maddalena. So Alessandro, do you want to give an introduction to yourself and let everyone know what your expertise are in the fields?
Sure. Thank you very much for the invitation. Clearly, my name is Alessandro De Maddalena, and I mainly work on sharks. I've been fanatic about sharks since I was a kid, and let's say from mid 90s, I started to work on sharks, and what I did basically was doing research on sharks, publishing scientific papers. Also, I love to write books, so I wrote 20 books to date about the biology of sharks, been published in many countries, in Italian, German, English, French, Czech, etc. And also I host expeditions since 2010, where I take people to see great whites in their habitat. So most of these expeditions take place in South Africa. Here, I'm now in Simonstown on False Bay, and we travel to Gansby, Mossel Bay, always in South Africa. And also I host expeditions in South Australia too, again, to see great whites. On these expeditions, I give a course in shark biology, so that every day we go out at sea, we cage dive with the sharks, and I give the talks in English, French, and Italian for my guests. And also I worked for 5 years for the University in Milan as a professor of ichthyology, basically. And I also give a lot of talks, I travel, I give talks about the biology of sharks mostly, sometimes about orcas, because orcas have been, let's say, my second passion for all my life. And actually, my passion for cetaceans was born even before my passion for sharks. And let's say that at a certain point in my life, I had to decide if I wanted to become a shark expert or a cetacean expert. I chose sharks because in some way I prefer studying sharks, but let's say that cetaceans and especially orcas still have a big place in my heart. So in 2014, I started to host orca expeditions in Norway, where we take people to see orcas in the wild, and also we go in the water with snorkel with orcas. And my job is giving lectures about orca biology. And, and that's it. Basically, this is what I do. It's it, when I was a kid, I was like 8 years old. I saw my very first documentary about great whites. I was already very interested in zoology, paleontology, and I saw on the screen this animal, the great white, and it seemed like a prehistoric animal. So since that moment, I decided, okay, I still want to be interested in prehistoric animals, but I wanted to be a paleontologist first, and then it was that moment that I decided I wanted to study sharks, because basically they are prehistoric animals, but they are still alive today. So you are fanatic about dinosaurs, but you know that you are never going to see them alive. With great whites, it's a little easier until we don't get them extinct, and we are working on this. In this sense, I must say, but we are lucky to live in a period that sharks are still alive, great whites are still alive at the moment. They are becoming clearly more and more rare around the world in the most part of the distribution. But we are still lucky. We can still see them underwater, alive in the ocean. And let's say that then I decided to study natural sciences. I took my degree, my Master of Science in Natural Sciences from the University in Milan with a thesis about the presence of the great whites in Mediterranean Sea. And most of this work was based on studying findings in natural history museums. And then I extended this kind of work, doing research on the Natural History Museum materials preserved in Europe. And I built, let's say, a database that has become, let's say, the root of my research program on great whites in the Mediterranean Sea. And I must say, I spent most of my time studying the presence of the great white in the Mediterranean, the distribution, diet, reproduction, fisheries, and this led to publishing a lot of scientific papers and some books about this species in that part of the world. And then, I always worked as a freelance, so I was able to choose what I wanted to do in any specific moment. That was the good part, because if you work for a university or a marine biology institute, clearly they will tell you what to do. I wanted to keep my freedom to study the animals, never using invasive methods of research or this kind of stuff. Clearly, it's difficult because basically you don't have like a fixed salary, but the good aspect is that you always decide what you do. You can follow your ethics, and I must say, with the passing of time, I was able to work with a lot of great researchers, interesting people, great photographers. So I've been rewarded in many ways. And still, today, I can decide what to do when I want to do research or other projects. So, for example, in this moment, I'm talking from my tiny shark museum that we opened not even 2 years ago here in Simonstown, Cape Town. And that's a project that I had in my mind, in my heart for a very long time, to have my own small shark museum where I can do, like, say, educational activities, giving talks, lectures, courses. And I must say I'm very happy. It's working pretty well.
I am. I have one question again, and then I'm sure Lena has one after that. But your expeditions have included observing orcas. Can you share some of the most remarkable behavior, or some of the more remarkable behaviors or interactions that you've witnessed among these creatures during your expeditions?
Sure. When I decided that the Great White Shark Expedition with a shark biology course were working very well, and I got a lot of interest from the public. It's not something that is for like the common tourist, because you need to find people that are so interested in sharks to come for like from 5 to 7 days to get the lectures every single day, a lot of hours of lectures and diving with the sharks, going out at sea. So something for a very specific audience, not for the common tourist. So I thought maybe it's time that I do something like that with Orcas, if there is some operator that is interested. And clearly was thinking about the best area to do this, and clearly you need to have a place where you get a lot of orcas, so people are maybe paying a lot of money, but at the same time they have some kind of guarantee they're going to see the animals, see them up and close, properly, to also observe different behaviors. So there are not many places around the world where you can have such interactions, because orcas are everywhere, but there are not so many places where they are that abundant that you can go there and be pretty sure, let's say almost 100% sure you're going to see them in good number. So clearly, first I was thinking about the waters around British Columbia, Alaska, Washington State, but then, there are so many operators doing whale watching in that part of the world. And I wanted something that was like kind of different. Then I found out that this was in 2014. I found out that in Norway there was the possibility to actually go in the water with orcas, and kind of surprised me because actually I knew very little at the time about that aspect. As you know, in most countries, it's just forbidden to go in the water with cetaceans. Even in South Africa, there's plenty of cetaceans, plenty of whales, and even here in False Bay, we get at least 3 species of whales, from humpback whales, bright whales, southern right whales. Sometimes we get orcas, we get plenty of common dolphins, but you cannot go in the water with animals. You cannot swim or snorkel with animals. It's completely forbidden. The strange thing is that at the time of the year that along the South African coast, there is the sardine run, the migration of sardine. Then everybody is allowed to go into water with the stations in the most dangerous situation ever, because there is plenty of food, whale feeding. That is completely legal. You know, it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so I approached one of the operators who was doing this snorkeling with orcas in Norway. But, you know, my priority is working with people that really care about the animals, clearly also about the safety of people they take into the water, but first, people working with respect for the animals. So I think that working with kind of pioneers, it helps you a lot, because when you find the first one that did this kind of thing, then you know is has the longest experience. This is why I approached this operator, which is Orca Norway, and I say, okay, maybe they're interested. I come on board, I give talks about orca biology, and then I can see what they are doing with the orcas and how they are working. And I was very, very impressed, because really they care about the animals, and they always, you know, try to find the orcas. They want to cooperate. If some orcas, some group, they don't want to cooperate, they don't want to be potted, or they are simply resting, they just leave them alone and they look for another group of orcas that want to interact. And in most cases, the interaction is very little. I mean, with a big ship, we find the orcas, and then everybody goes on a small boat, like a dinghy. It's a metallic boat. We call it Urek. So people will go on this small boat. It's freezing cold because it's Norway. We go above the polar circle. Usually we will be around the area of Tromsø, but now even more northern will be around Cherbourg. It's very cold. So many times maybe +5 degrees, many times maybe -5, sometimes -10, but then you get polar wind, and the sensation can be much colder than that. And the water usually is about 5 degrees. But the problem is 5+5. The problem is that go in the water and you come back to the small boat. You go in the water, you come back to the small. So you do this kind of stuff for sometimes up to 3 hours in a row. And then even if you are wearing a dry suit, at the end of the day, it may be very, very cold, you know. But you see people freezing to death, but they still want to get more, because it's so magic to be in the water with orcas, and when you see them just at the surface, they swim so close to the dinghy. Sometimes we get so many of them, just unbelievable. And you asked me about some special moment underwater. And I think that my most beautiful moment with orcas, okay, 2 most beautiful moments with orcas, because it's difficult to pick up only one. In one case, I was in the water alone, and we always avoid to be alone, because clearly the dive master, his name is Pierre Robert de la Tour, is French, is Orca man. He will instruct everybody. They must close to him. They must be close to him all the time for safety reasons. Also because he wants to manage the way people interact with the orcas. He doesn't want anybody getting too close to the orcas, harassing the orcas, disturbing the orcas. So we must be close to him all the time. The problem is that when you are snorkeling with a dry suit, it's very difficult to move in the water. Sometimes really you struggle to go back to the boat. And maybe you get the dive master screaming, come back to the boat. Yes, I'm trying, but it's very difficult. And sometimes you can get a stronger current in the fjords. And on that day, I just left far apart from the boat and the entire group. And when I realized this, then suddenly I saw I had the two big males, orcas, coming straight to me. There was this magic moment. I was trying to actually take a picture, but the camera cannot focus because underwater is very dark, So I got these two big males with the big dorsal fin coming 1 meter to my face, one above and one below, looking at me straight. And that was the moment, most magical moment, one of the most beautiful moments in my life. I had these personal moments with these two big male orcas. And the other moment that I always remember, a very magic one, was when I was in the water with 14 orcas feeding on a big bait ball. And they just didn't care about us. It lasted 20 minutes. And the orcas were swimming close to us, feeding. Usually orcas don't care about you when you're in the water. They just pass by and they barely look at you. But in this kind of situation, they were not really worried about our presence or caring about our presence because they were just thinking about feeding and interacting the action. So they could catch of the food. But for us, it was just magic because we were so close to them. We were seeing the action happening up and close. Was really unbelievable. Flashing the belly to the fish, all this kind of stuff. Tie slapping, it was just unbelievable. And most of the time, you see a bait ball, you enter in the water, and the herrings are just gone, because the bait ball may last minutes, may last seconds, but it's very difficult to find a bait ball that lasts like 20 minutes, like at that time, Sometimes you may be lucky, even half an hour, but I mean, it's not common.
So I do have a question. So Norway is a very particular experience, and it is very cold, and the gear in order to dive in Norway is extensive, and it is hard to move in the water. Why not a place like Bremer Canyon? If you're working in South Australia, why not do tours in Bremer Canyon where it's a little more temperate?
Because you see, Norway, the history of this kind of activity. I mean, the operator that started the snorkeling with orcas in Norway was the very first in the world. I actually approached Ingrid Visser, who's working with orcas in New Zealand, and because I wanted to work with her, I co-wrote a small scientific paper with her years before. And I thought maybe, we can do something like that, like an orca expedition with orca biology course in New Zealand. But she told me very clearly that it was very difficult to pick up a moment of the year when you can go there in New Zealand waters and have very good chances to actually see the orcas. And we were thinking about maybe doing like a more generalistic cetacean trip, But then I found out that this opportunity to snorkel with orcas in Norway. I understood that the presence of orcas in Norwegian waters is much more abundant and much more constant than in Australia, New Zealand, or most parts of the world. And then, as I said, the fact that they started to do snorkeling with orcas in Norway, it was kind of an assurance. They were doing something in a way they really knew how to do it. It was not like going to do something for the first time with no experience. This kind of activity was going very well. They never had a single accident. And I mean, it was managed very, very well. And with the passing of years, because as I said, I started to do this in 2014, now 10 years basically passed, I saw the progression of the situation, And I must say not in a totally positive way, because at the time when I started, there were very few operators doing this. And basically, there was no permit required to do this in Norway. So just in a few years' time, you saw a lot of new operators just, raising and growing up and taking more and more clients. And on the few last trip I did there, I noticed that sometimes there are just too many boats. And now they're starting to put in place some rules, because clearly there also is a problem with the interaction with whale watchers and the fishing industry. Because most of the time we find the orcas and we find the fishing vessels, because both are interested in herrings, So there will be always control from the government of what is going on between whale watching and fishing, because they don't want them to fight, basically. Because already, as you can imagine, the fishermen are not so happy with the orcas, because some of them has nothing to complain about, but like happened in many countries, human history, sometimes fishermen complain about the orcas. Too many orcas stealing our fish, this kind of thing. So it's good that the government always keep an eye on what is going on to see that nothing bad is happening between the whale watchers and the fishing industry. At the same time, they are just starting to put in place some solid rule, so that ecotourism, whale watching activities are not going to put too much pressure on the orcas. What we do, that many times we go on a spot, maybe we find a lot of boats. If the boats are just too many, we find another place, because we don't want to be part of an activity that is going to put too much pressure on the orcas. I mean, ecotourism, I think, is a very powerful tool. But like happened with the sharks or with any other wild animal, you must have solid rules, you must have enforcement, you must have control over the situation. Otherwise, the risk is that become a nuisance for the animals, which is clearly something that nobody wants.
It gets out of control, doesn't it? If there's no regulations. But in our very first episode, Alessandro, we spoke to Hayne Stradler, and she was talking about the historical relationship between the Norwegian people and the orca, and how the heron almost went extinct from overfishing. But besides that, I wanted to go back to your shark museum. You and your wife established a shark museum in South Africa, but could you tell us more about the inspiration behind crafting this museum and the role it plays in educating the public about sharks and marine conservation? But with I think what a lot of people of the group would like to know is has there been any interaction between port and starboard? And in your museum, have you addressed this or made any kind of like educational programs to inform people how port and starboard, the two male orcas, have had an effect on the shark population in that habitat?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. So, again, when I was very young, when I was a kid, I loved museums, and I had the chance of having one of the best natural history museum in my hometown in Milan. Still has a very beautiful natural history museum, even better nowadays, with a beautiful exhibit, very beautiful exhibit also about cetaceans, but also about different groups of animals, not about sharks, sadly. But let's say that in general, the prehistoric section was fantastic. So it was a very big inspiration to me. And I always been very interested in natural history museums. So as I said, one very important part of my thesis when I was at university was about finding and studying materials belonging to great whites preserved in natural history museums in Italy. And then later I extended the study to all natural history museums in Europe. In more recent years, I also published a book about great white shark materials in the United States Museum. So you see, always had a very strong focus about the natural history museum collections. So one of my dreams was having my own small shark museum. I even built models when I was a kid, figuring out how to make a shark museum. And the idea remained like stuck in my mind. I'm now 52. So a couple of years ago, no, more like 4 years ago, when we had the chance of buying this small property here in Simonstown near Cape Town, it was actually my wife. She's a biologist, and she told me, I know you have this big dream, let's make the shark museum. It will be maybe a small one, but maybe you can be satisfied. We can do educational activities, because that's the point, basically. So we worked hard for a couple of years, and we opened it in the end of 2021. And to date, we succeeded to give really many dozens of talks. People attending the talks are from kids to scientists, students of natural sciences, biology, marine biology, zoology, and tourists. So we get a wide range of people coming to listen to the lectures. And the lectures are, let's say, like the lectures I used to give during my courses in shark biology or in orca biology. They tend to be quite deeper, but explained in a way that everybody can understand. So people don't need to have a biology degree to understand the lectures, So something, and that's also the way that I always write my books, my articles. So the people can find them interesting, can understand them, even if they are not specialists. But actually, most of the things that I do are aimed at the specialist, okay? But again, explain it in a way that is easy to understand for everybody. So the most popular of my talks that I repeat continuously is about great whites of South Africa. And in this talk, I always explain about what's going on with the orcas in South Africa. And because I think it's very important, because you get the information from the media, and the information from the media sounds like sensational, but it's very wrong to me. Because the message people get from the media basically is that orcas have destroyed the population of great whites in South African waters, which is basically rubbish. It's not true, The truth is that over the past about 5 years, we had these two orcas, port and starboard, who killed about 10 great whites, which means an average of 2 great whites per year. Now, do you think that a population of great whites, which has been estimated, depending by the team that did the studies, from 200 individuals to 2,000 individuals, do you think that killing 2 great whites per year can really be a problem, can really be an issue for a population of great whites? Clearly it's not. And also the other idea that comes to the media, straight to the public, is that the orcas are the predator of great whites. And we look at the situation outside South Africa, how many cases we have of orcas actually preying on great whites. Even when it comes to the group of orcas who specialize in feeding on cartilaginous species, meaning sharks and rays, you find very, very few cases of orcas killing and eating great whites. Basically, outside South Africa, we have 2 cases confirmed, only one in California, and only one in South Australia, and that's it. So clearly, this tells you that great whites are not a normal prey for orcas. Then you see that all these cases that are basically about 10 cases confirmed in South African waters over the last 5 years, and nothing else, are all caused by these 2 orcas. So clearly there's something special, something strange, something strongly unusual about these two orcas who killed those 10 great whites. And clearly we don't know what it is, but something must have happened to these two orcas. Also because, you know, they have both the dorsal fin collapse. And this is something that you usually observe in captivity or in the wild. Usually you observe this in old individuals or sick individuals. So let's say in general, we can say that you observe the collapsed dorsal fin in individuals that are not able to move properly anymore. So something must be happened to these two orcas, even because we get orcas in the area, but usually we get orcas around April and May. And the orcas we get are orcas who feed on dolphins. So they enter Foss Bay here and they chase the dolphins. They get some dolphin, they go away, and that's it. And you don't see orcas anymore for the rest of the year. That's the normal situation. That has been the normal situation forever. And then you get these two orcas again, port and starboard, who just stay here along the coast, very close inshore, and they just move along the coast of the Western Cape, going from Cape Town to Mossel Bay, coming back, you understand. So the way they move, the way they hunt, the way they stay close to the shore, everything is strange, everything is abnormal. We can just guess the reason.
It almost sounds like
so clearly, when I give talks, I always explain this to the people because they must be aware that the reason of the disappearance of great white, I mean, of the dramatic decrease of great whites, is overfishing. It's lack of enforcement, it's lack of control, because the great white is protected in South African waters since 1991. It's been the very first country in the world to protect great whites. But now, clearly, there is not enough control. We are seeing a strong and massive decrease, not only in the number of great whites, but also in the number of other species of sharks. Bronze whaler, seven gills, hammerhead sharks, gray nurse, also called the reggae-tooth or sand tiger sharks, blue sharks, mako sharks, all species are decreasing. And the other big problem is that when you say that other species of sharks are decreasing, you are also saying that you are taking away the food for great whites, because the great white feed a lot on other species of sharks. And these are especially important when great whites are young, let's say from when they are born at about 1.2, 1.5 meters, up to 3 meters. In this phase of their growth, it's very important they feed on smaller species of sharks. You kill too many species of sharks, you kill too many smaller and medium-sized species of sharks, you're taking away the food to great whites. And that's what happened. And so blaming orcas is nonsense. Clearly, orcas can chase the sharks away, but if there are great whites, they always come back.
And not only that, if the number of sharks decrease in the area, it means that the number of fish that feed on the coral reefs increases, and then you have a whole collapse of the food chain.
Also, probably, great whites are a very big, important tool of natural selection, especially on the population of Cape fur seals. And we have here a population of about 64,000 to 70,000 fur seal living only on Seal Island here in False Bay. And clearly, great whites are a very important tool to control the population. You get too many seals, and then the seal eat almost everything, from sharks to mollusks to penguins, and the population of penguins is collapsing. So you see, it's like a chain reaction.
I've two kind of questions. One is factual, and then the other one is absolutely just fun. Okay, the two orca, port and starboard, they almost sound and act as if they weren't part of that the habitat to begin with, that they came in from somewhere else and then they stayed there. Their behaviour is unlike all of the orca that's found in South Africa, but maybe those orca are from somewhere else and they came down to South Africa and stayed there. And And then the other one, what's your opinion on that? But and then the other question, that's just a fun question. The Megalodon, who would win in a fight against the Megalodon? A small pod of Orca or the Megalodon?
So about the first question, you know that clearly I was trying to understand the reason why these orcas behave in such a different way. And you know that off Cape Town, there are a lot of longliners because there used to be plenty of fish. There's still a lot of fish, but it's decreasing very quick. But anyway, we get a lot of longliners. So for people that don't know about longliners, they are fishing vessels using very long line, meaning very, very long line. On average, one line is armed with about an average of 1,500 hooks. So you can just imagine how many animals they are going to catch. And longliners, pelagic longliners, are mostly used to catch tunas and swordfish. So very interesting for the fishermen, for the human economy. But we know that longliners can catch a lot of non-target species. So in some areas, they counted up to 90% of catches constituted by sharks, actually, only 10% of tuna. That's clearly an extreme, but just to give you an idea. And clearly they will kill a lot of dolphins, sea turtles, seabirds, everything. But this fishing gear is still loved everywhere in the world. That's the disaster. This is why I stopped to eat tuna years ago. I love tuna, clearly, but this is a problem. So this is something that we can do, you know. Anyway, we know that sometimes fishermen shoot the animals that steal the fish from the long lines. We know that it's illegal, but it happens. Sometimes they shoot a dolphin, sometimes they shoot a seal, and why not? Maybe they shot these two orcas, and then the orcas are not able to swim like before. This is why maybe they got the collapsed dorsal fin. So maybe they switched their diet from other prey to easier prey. Because, for example, if orcas and dolphins, clearly they must be very fast, very quick, very agile. If they cannot swim properly, maybe dolphins are just too difficult for them. And the great whites, clearly, especially when the orcas aren't in pair, clearly people think that great whites are that huge. But just keep in mind that the average total length for a great white shark is 3.5 meters. That's the average. Still a huge fish, but not as big as most people think. You think to an orca, then you get a 6 or 7 meter animal. So it's so much easier for them to kill a shark than to kill a dolphin, because clearly also sharks and even great whites can swim very fast. The great white probably may attain up to about 50 kilometers per hour. Other specialists say maybe 30, but probably is around 30 kilometers per hour, but for a very short period of time. While a dolphin can swim very fast for a much extended period, so, and also more agile than a shark. So maybe they switched on the great white because it's just an easier prey. The great white has no predator normally, so it's not simply not used to be hunted. And then what they do, they are clever animals. If a great white is killed, they just leave the area. But as I said, the population still exists. They always come back. And then we see the situation is just absurd. For example, no great whites has been observed to be killed in False Bay. Still, False Bay has been the place where great whites didn't come back almost at all. We saw a couple then and then, but it's just absurd because you see, there must be another reason. Clearly, fishing is the other reason, because we passed from seeing up to 10 great whites per morning in the peak of the high season, usually around July, to not seeing even one great white per day or even per month. It's just absurd.
Yeah.
And about the second question, about the Megalodon. You know that there have been this crazy fake documentary by Discovery Channel years ago. They say the Megalodon is still alive. He lives in False Bay. He sink boats, kill people. A lot of people believe this story, even because they named the shark the submarine, and the submarine was an actual great white that was observed in the area many years ago. You know. Clearly, the Megalodon is an extinct animal, and he didn't kill anybody, didn't sink any boat, and all the interview in this fake documentary were fake, just actors playing shark specialists and something like that, you know. About the fight between Megalodon and the Orcas, you know, the Megalodon has been estimated to measure, depending on the different paleontologists that studied the species. Somebody said up to 16 meters, somebody up to 18 meters. Anyway, much bigger than the present-day great white. The present-day great white, I was able to estimate with my studies a maximum size of 6.6 meters, which anyway is very rare. The largest great white I saw in my life, visiting Guadalupe, South Africa, four different sites, plus South Australia. The biggest one I ever saw was 5.4 meters, or about 5.5 meters. And that's the biggest one I saw. So you understand when I say the average size is 3.5 meters, that's something that you can actually see, you know. Bigger ones like 4 meters, 4.5, 5 meters, 5 meters very rare. You know? So when you say the Megalodon, perhaps attained 16 or 18 meters, you know, we are saying that it was much, much bigger than the great white. Still, we don't know much about the Megalodon because it's a cartilaginous fish. We even don't know about the morphology, the shape of the body, because the skeleton is made of cartilage. So they actually never found a complete skeleton of Megalodon. They found a tip, a lot of tip, because it's the only part of the body of the shark which is actually made of bony tissue. So it's possible to preserve as a fossils much easier than the rest of the body, which is made of cartilage. Sometimes we get the central part of the vertebrae, the centrum, because it's more calcified than the rest of the skeleton, still cartilaginous. But even finding this cylindrical stuff, which make the vertebral column, don't tell you much about the morphology, about the shape of the body. So when you see the illustrations and they paint the Megalodon like a huge great white, it is a lot of speculation. I mean, it's fascinating, but we don't know much. It seemed that the Megalodon actually was feeding on whales, but you know, maybe just as a scavenger. Somebody said that they also feed on the live animals, or was a hunter of whales. Probably, maybe. And then when you think about Megalodon, you think about maybe 16 or 18 meters, okay, but that's the maximum estimate. So maybe the average size for a Megalodon was about 10 meters. If you compare to an orca, okay, orca usually is a little shorter than that, maybe around more 6 or 7 meters, female, male. And then, but then, again, very important, orcas and group. So I think that if orcas wanted to kill a 10-meter Megalodon, they can still succeed, but maybe they were not actually taking the risk. When you think that today, only those 2 orcas in South Africa hunted regularly, great whites, it tells you one thing very clearly. Even the population of orcas, which specialize in hunting sharks, usually they focus on species that are or small-sized or not dangerous. They can kill a basking shark or a whale shark, but if they go to attack a tiger shark or a mako shark, which are much more dangerous, they usually select the smaller individuals, you know. So, and it makes sense. Why taking risk? Yes, probably they are able to kill a 6-meter great white, but why taking risk? You know, I think that all the animals just think that way. They can hunt as a group, they don't want to take risk, but it's the same thing for sharks, because even the great white, when he has to select the prey, always select much smaller animals, because it's easier. Why taking risk?
So do you have a question there, Elena?
I did have a question. So I watched something maybe a year ago, and I'm not an expert on sharks. I actually know very little about them, but there was some evidence, or at least a correlation, that there might be a hormone that they release if they're afraid in an area that actually scares away other sharks. And I was wondering if you knew anything about this hormone.
Yeah, of course. What happens is that, there have been a lot of studies done based on the fact that actually was observed if a shark is killed, or if several sharks are killed in an area, sometimes we can get as a reaction the sharks will actually very quickly leave the area. And this was first observed by people who were fishing for sharks. Fishing for sharks has happened all over the world, mostly as bycatch, but also there have been activities were focused on fishing specifically for sharks, having sharks as a target. And then there is an interesting book, for example, by William Travis, title was Shark for Sale. I'm sure you can still find it. And there is this kind of observation. This, I think, was the very first time I read about it. They were killing sharks, dropping the part of the shark that they didn't want to keep, discarding like the head of the sharks, and they noticed the shark were leaving the area. So clearly, many years later, after this kind of observation was reported by several group of fishermen around the world, some scientists bothered to see why this was happening, and they wanted to also know if that was just a myth or was really a thing that was actually happening. And they actually found out that it was a real thing. If you kill sharks in an area, sharks are likely to leave the place. And not only sharks belonging to that species that you killed, but often also sharks belonging to other species. So the fact that they clearly try to find chemicals and they found some in the putrefied meat of shark. So something that proved that actually the shark were leaving the area because of fatty chemicals and acidic chemicals found in the water coming from the putrefied meat of the sharks. So they did some study targeting, trying to chase away some species of sharks, like the Caribbean reef shark. They found out that this worked. Just put in the water, not the whole shark, not part of the body of the shark, but just some chemicals from the putrefied meat of shark. And then they got a very quick response of sharks leaving the area, not only of the shark that was killed, or the component were coming from the shark killed, but also other species. So it makes perfectly sense that if an orca or two orcas, like in this case, kill a great white, then a great white leave the area. And the same thing was observed before in California waters, in South Australia waters. And the shark, the great whites, were just leaving the area. In those cases, the area was specifically frequented by great white, like they were going there, staying there for a long time. So it was very clear that great white were leaving the area because of the killing. Same situation has been observed here. It is interesting to note that in the previous years, when we only had orcas hunting dolphins coming to the area where great whites were present, we never observed great white leaving the area. So it wasn't simply the presence of the orcas that was chasing the great white away. Like the great white knew perfectly that those orcas were hunting dolphins and not bothering about hunting the great white or the seals or any other prey. So it was safe for them. And if you were lucky, on the same day, you could spot the great whites and the orcas just a few hundred meters apart, with these orcas hunting great whites, they know about this. So the presence of the orcas chase the shark away. The killing of great white will chase the shark away for sure, for sometimes for a very long, very extended period of time. But what bothered me, so this is sure, but what bothered me, as I said, is the fact that in other areas, like happening in California or Australia, great whites always come back. We are not seeing great whites coming back. I mean, in False Bay, they are kind of not coming back at all. You can see one there and then, and that's it. In Gasby, they are coming back in very low number and usually very small individual. And sometimes we have to wait months just to see one. It's unbelievable. In Mossel Bay, the situation is going a little better. But even there, they are experiencing a very long period of time without a single great white. So the situation is very, very worrying because the other important thing, there is not a single place in South Africa where did they observe an increase or I mean a clear increase of great white number. You know, somebody say we see more activity in Plettenberg Bay, but the problem is that before, I mean, like 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago, there was very little observation of great whites in Plettenberg Bay. Now they are studying great whites in Plettenberg Bay, so you have observer there all year round. So clearly they get a lot more observation, but this is not a proof of an actual increase of great whites. That's the problem.
So we
Now-
only have 8 minutes left, and I just wanted to ask you some closing questions. You've taught online courses of the biology of orcas. What are some of the key aspects of orca biology and ecology that you find the most captivating and important for people to learn about?
I think that the most interesting thing is about their intelligence, about how clever they are, and the different hunting strategies, you know. So the different way they're able to adapt to the different prey, the different locations of the world, the different strategies they always invent to hunt as a group to apply to the different prey. I think this is extraordinary. On the other hand, I always find kind of puzzling the fact that you get the resident orcas that tend to stick on their food. They seem kind of unable to switch on a more common, more abundant prey item. It's very difficult to put these two things together, you know, that sometimes they seem so strict, sometimes they seem so intelligent, so clever, and so willing to adapt, you know. But I think the most fascinating effect is the way they are hunting. And the beautiful thing about that, when I teach this kind of aspect about their predatory behavior in Norwegian waters, is that when people go in the water, sometimes they are lucky, they can actually see the orcas preying on the herrings, so they can learn about it, and then they can actually see that underwater with their own eyes. I think that's a very rewarding experience.
I have one other question that I'm going to close on, Sandro. But then I think Elena has one question. So we'll just do this very quickly.
Questions, Nick. There will never not be questions, okay?
But just one of my my closing question, and we only have 6 minutes left. But we know that there's a large problem with the overfishing of sharks because they're targeting fins only, and some Asian countries are prominent in this destruction of the habitats around the world for sharks. Do you find that is there any impact on the South Australia or South African population of sharks due to the fishing of fins?
Yes, for sure, because we know for sure that some sharks here in the local waters along the coast of the Western Cape are fished specifically to send the fins to the Asian markets. So you see that clearly you have any kind of fishing along the coast. We have, for example, track net fishermen who just fish from the shore in a very traditional way, like artisanal fishing, and the impact is pretty low. Also, my friend Chris follows has teached to this, has taught to these fishermen to release the sharks, and he spent the past 20 years teaching the fishermen to actually do that. You know, fishermen can understand. And clearly, fishermen care about the environment, keeping the environment healthy, because they understand that if they do that, then there will be more fish for the next generation of fishermen, you know. So it's not true that the fishermen don't care. Many fishermen just need to be educated. And we saw that it worked pretty well. So fishermen are actually catching sometimes a great white, most commonly like a smooth-hound, bronze whaler, or sand tiger sharks, and then they are releasing them, they are putting back into the water. So this can be done. But apart that, we also have a lot of illegal fishing. So there are even fishermen that catch great whites from the shore to sell the teeth and the jaws to dealers. And then we'll have like shark enthusiasts from Europe, shark collectors that will buy this kind of stuff, even if they know they are going to damage the population of sharks. They still want to have great white teeth or this kind of stuff. And also we have a problem with export, because Australia, for example, is pretty strict in the regulation about fishing for sharks in their waters, but at the same time, they are importing shark meat from South Africa, Australia, to be used for fish and chips. And then at the top of that, we also have bycatch, as I said, long lining, but not only long lining. Many different kind of fisheries have sharks as bycatch, meaning it's not the target species, but by mistake, kill the shark and then another, and then a million of sharks. You know.
Lena, do you want to? Before just after Lena's question, we have 2 minutes, almost 3 minutes left. I just want to ask, what's your favorite shark? And then at just Elena's question.
Okay, that's very banal as well. My favorite shark is the great white. My second favorite is the mako shark, which is a close relative to the great white, because both belong to the family Lamnidae. In this family, we also have the porbigo, we have the salmon shark, and we have two species of mako shark. The shorefin mako, which is very common around the world, and also we have the longfin mako, which is a much rarer species. The shorefin mako is very beautiful. It's my second favorite species. It looks a little bit like a great white, but it's more slender, has this beautiful metallic blue coloration. It can swim up to 100 kilometers per hour, can jump out of the water up to at least 7 meters high from the surface. It's just unbelievable.
I love whale sharks and basking sharks myself.
Right, yeah, of course. Yeah,
when
very beautiful.
We used to get fossils. We used to order in fossils from places, and my brother and I would always try and get lemon shark teeth because I think they're extinct. And we thought it would be really cool to have completely extinct specimens. And so there's a rock box that has anything from shark teeth to fossils and, you know, geodes in it somewhere in my mom's basement that has lemon shark teeth.
Of course, you know, a lot of people want to have the real great white tooth. Okay, you cannot buy real great white tooth because the species is protected, because if you buy this kind of item, you are pushing some fishermen in some part of the world to kill them, some poachers. A lot of great white teeth come from Madagascar, for example, where local fishermen don't care about fishing for great whites, but they still kill some of them because the dealers want to buy the jaws and the teeth to sell to like European collectors mostly. So But of course, you can buy fossil teeth. You can find fossil teeth of great white or megalodon or lemon shark or any other species, because just think, in this moment, on this planet, we have 540 species of sharks described today, okay? But sharks appeared on our planet 425 million years ago. So the group is much older than the dinosaurs. Clearly, in this very long evolutionary history, we had many species that went extinct. And clearly, all the species just produced a huge amount of teeth that got fossilized. So you can buy fossil shark teeth everywhere, and you are not harming any shark. So why buy teeth from sharks that swim in the oceans nowadays? Just buy the fossil stuff. Come on. So
You know, it's funny that you mentioned about fossil teeth, Alessandro, because one of the most unique and, I guess, awesome looking teeth belong to a shark is the whorl toothed shark, WHORL toothed shark, who has that spiral.
yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy, and they don't really know exactly why it has that, but I would imagine just because of defense reasons or something.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It's just very weird.
Yeah, it's just a very strange feature on a shark. But we're out of time now, but which is
last question. I had something that was just on my mind that was fun, but my last question was, orcas are often identified with names and with scientific numbers. And I was wondering if sharks are also identified in a similar way. Can you identify them from fins like individuals, or?
Yeah, it's good that you ask, because clearly the fin printing was used for a very long time for many species of dolphins, clearly, including specifically orcas, and worked so well. You know, the dorsal fin shape, all the nicks, and also the saddle patch. But also this system was used now for a long time for great whites too. Let's say you cannot apply the fin printing to all species of sharks, because you get many species of sharks where the dorsal fin just look almost the same in all the individuals. But for great whites, and also for a few other species too, but for great whites it works very well, because the dorsal fin of a great white has kind of variation depending on the individual. They have nicks, indentations, they have differences in colors, and this is used very much to identify the species, the individuals of sharks. And then the shape of the dorsal fin remain more or less the same, even with the passing of years. There can be some modification, some changes, but not that big if you have like a continuous, like a long-term research program, and you have the possibility to take pretty often pictures, then clearly you are not going to make any mistake. But also, not only the dorsal fin is used, usually also the coloration is used a lot. Specifically, is used the coloration of the area of the gill slits, also the pelvic area, and the coloration of the anterior margin of the lower lobe of the cutoff. Because these three parts of the body have a very specific coloration in every individual. The margin of the dark coloration, and many times there will be spots, dots, things like that. And the other thing that you use to identify the great whites is the presence of scars, but you must be very careful, because scars may change very quickly. Sometimes you get great white with a bad bite, and then you think it's going to stay like that, you know, but just in a few months' time, it can heal almost completely, and then the scar may change a lot.
I have one. I'm sorry now, Alessandro, but I have one question that just came to me.
Sorry, I didn't answer everything. Just wanted to say that yes, we use name to identify great whites. Yes, please.
Just one more question. Okay, so orcas communicate with each other through whistle clicks, and what was the other one? Whistles, clicks, and Elena, what was it? There's 3 ways they communicate.
Vocalizations, anyway.
Short.
And vocalizations.
Yes, the vocalizations, but
yeah.
Whistles, yes.
Is there any evidence of communication between sharks, or is it mostly chemical based that they communicate with each other with?
Mostly communication, for what we know today, mostly communication among sharks is made of body language. So they communicate through the body language, the body posture, and that's the way they communicate. We don't know of any actual sound they may produce. This has not been demonstrated to date. So probably that's what they do. The body language of sharks has been, let's say, poorly studied. If you take the group of hammerhead sharks and you take specifically scalloped hammerhead, but also bonneted hammerhead, these groups have been studied a lot when it comes to body language. Also because they used to congregate to form huge groups like they do in the scalloped hammerhead, like they do, for example, in Mexican and Californian waters. So we know they congregate, they communicate to each other through body language. This body language has been described and some kind of interpretation has been given, at least for some of these languages. So we know that this works, and also something like that has been found in the great white. Like, for example, they find a potential source of food, like they find the carcass of a seal or a dolphin, and you get 2 great whites. If one is smaller, one is bigger, usually the bigger one has the priority to feed on the food, And sometimes they just do what we call parallel swimming. They swim in parallel, very close to each other, like they measure each other, and then the biggest one has the priority to go to it, and the other one just give way and just wait for its turn, So this kind of stuff has been found to be used by great white for communication. But clearly, we still have a long way to go to understand, to fully understand the way they communicate. It just scratches the surface of this aspect.
That sounds like the
or vocal cords in sharks. I don't recall that in anatomy.
Please say again.
I don't recall anything like phonic lips or vocal cords in shark anatomy. So I don't think they make noises that we hear.
You get some of those stupid movies about the killer shark. In some of those movies, the great white actually produce sounds like a roar, like a lion, something like that. I always found that funny,
It is funny.
You mentioned that the short distance communication is body language. But we also heard an example in this podcast of long distance communication with the chemicals released from the head. Maybe there is more chemical signatures that's been used to communicate with long distance using chemicals. I mean, there's certainly specialized.
Surely that's possible. That's possible, but we still have to find clear evidence. It's an hypothesis.
Hypothesis. Okay, well, that's it anyway. And thanks very much, Alessandro, for continuing to answer questions there, even beyond the hour mark. And thanks very much, Elena. And I hope you found this episode very interesting. I certainly did. It was fascinating. Look, between the relationship between orcas and sharks, there's a lot of miscommunication and hysteria and sensationalism in the the mass media, like usual. And I'm glad that we can cover and kind of like show some reality of what's really going on. But anyway, thanks for
it's been a really a pleasure, because I think that's really very important that people know, people are aware, because media are supposed to to be made to inform the public, which means to give proper information, even when you talk about scientific matters. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
No problem,
you.
Alessandro. But what I wanted to say is, can you please promote some of your works, some of the most important stuff that you want to get out there, so that people can actually see some of your work or your website, or what next events you're having, or what do you want to say to the people out there?
Okay, thank you so much. My website is alessandrodemaddalena.net, and I post there everything about my work, my future expeditions. Also, I have a Facebook page, facebook.com/ADM Shark, like Alessandro De Maddalena, ADM Shark, and also an Instagram page, always ADM Shark. And you can find there all my next expeditions, my next lectures. I have a tour of lectures in Europe in October and early November. And also about my new books published and all the stuff concerning my work with sharks, from photography to illustration to research to expeditions, education, etc. Thank you so much.
No problem. We're going to stay here for just at the end of this to do the little promo. And I guess we'll end it there.